Davy O'Connell drew the small rucksack over his shoulder and stepped out through the main doors of the Billemont building of the European quarter of Brussels. It was Friday night, in the middle of September, and the air was still warm. He stood outside for a few minutes and looked around him. The sun was beginning to set slowly behind one of the office buildings that lined the Rue de la Loire. He had made it. This had been his first week working for the European Commission, and now the weekend was upon him. Now it was time to enjoy himself. The city of Brussels was no stranger to him. Having worked for the Irish government in Dublin, he had been able to travel backwards and forwards for a number of years on official business. That was at least what he told his superiors, but managed to arrange it so that his visits coincided with the weekend. Brussels was a place he enjoyed, and he was beginning to feel at home here. He walked across a small courtyard in front of the building, up the steps and out onto the street. The rush hour traffic had started an hour before, and now the usual traffic jam was beginning to build up on this main thoroughfare through Brussels. He looked up and down the street. He didn't have a car, so the queues of cars struggling to leave the city didn't bother him too much. He used the public transport and was beginning to feel familiar with the metro system, the trams and the buses. His apartment was conveniently situated in the centre of Brussels, so travelling daily to the European quarter was no great hardship. In front of him was the entrance to the metro system, where people were struggling up and down the stairs trying to make their way either in or out of the station. Friday evening, he thought to himself. Well, what to do? The air was fresh and he didn't want to go back to his new apartment. He was here to enjoy life, and he was determined to do so. Normally in Dublin, Friday evening was a ritual of getting home, having a quick shower, and then going out to his local pub. The regulars would be there as they were there every Friday night. Perhaps there would be a football game on the TV, a few beers from his friendly barman, and the weekend would start there. It had been a routine he had become used to. For a moment he felt a sense of loss, of nostalgia. He was living here now in Brussels, the centre of Europe. Here decisions were made on a daily basis, and he was now part of that. He felt an excitement. Anything was now possible. He could make a difference. His day was now different, and he was away from all those restrictions. Those days were gone. He had come here for a new life, and that is what he was determined to achieve. He was still young, or at least youngish, and there was a whole city before him to explore. For a moment he thought of walking down the stairs into the Schumann metro station and going back to his apartment, his new home. However, the thought of going back and being on his own this Friday evening didn't appeal to him. He knew he had things to do, such as unpacking and the few belongings he had brought with him and sorting out the apartment and, well, however, he had all the weekend to do that. There was no rush. He could feel his old life slipping away. Those days were gone when he did what people expected him to do, those old things that he'd grown up with, those things that his mother had always said, watching over his shoulder. His mother was in another country now, far away. He was a man on his own, and he was determined to make his life his own. He was determined to be his own man now, and that is why he had taken the job in the first place. Not to necessarily be important, but to feel as though he was once in charge of himself. Deep inside himself, he knew he wanted something. Perhaps here in Brussels he could find it. Either way, he had found it here and not in Ireland. So perhaps in Brussels he would find what he was looking for. On second thought, though, he thought, this was Friday night. The weekend has started. He turned away from the station entrance and walked quickly around the corner of the Berlimont building into a side street. A beer, he thought to himself. That's what I want. It's time to start enjoying myself. The Irish bar stood in the corner of another side street. From a distance it looked familiar and welcoming, a place for all those lost souls like himself who only wanted to drink and some pleasant company. Someone to talk to. He also knew that these places were predominantly English-speaking, so he wouldn't have to stretch his schoolboy French to its limits just to make himself understood. He would learn the local language, as he'd promised himself. But for now, he just wanted to relax. There it was, he thought, a small home from home. He walked down the side street with a small feeling of excitement. He was on his own in this town, and now he would have to find out if he had the personality to survive. Not only survive, but to succeed and turn his life around. It felt strange, though, not having the familiarity of his hometown and also knowing that he will not be meeting up with all his usual friends. No one knew him here, and that was exciting. He had nothing to live up. He had no reason. No, nobody knew him here in Brussels. He was a clean sheet, a blank page. He could be anyone he wanted to be. He could reinvent himself again. Reaching the pub, he once sort of hesitated, but for a moment he didn't know what to do. But then he pushed open the door and went in. Music was playing in the background and a few people were already at the bar. There was a gentle background noise of conversations, some in English, some in French, and some in languages he didn't readily recognize. It was decorated in wood, and there was a number of large mirrors hanging on the wall. The bar was at the far end, so letting the door close behind him, he walked across the floor towards it. Reaching the bar, he pulled out a tall wooden stool and took a seat. He immediately felt comfortable here. It was familiar, and then, again, maybe not. It was a balance between where he had come from and then something slightly different. It was not a Dublin bar, but it did have the feeling of an Irish bar. "What can I get you?" the barman asked, giving him a cheerful smile. Davy pulled a stool closer to the bar. "A beer, please. A large one." "Jupiter?" asked the barman. Yeah, that's fine," smiled Davy. It may not be home, he thought, but it's the closest thing. The closest thing I'll find around here.